Okay, I was almost worried about what I was going to do this week because there's no news coming out before Comic Con starts. But then I heard about this, and we'll talk about it in a second. Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd, and today we're going to talk about this little bit of news that came out today. Now, as we said in the opening, Comic Con is coming up this weekend as we are taping this particular episode. We're not going to hear anything until something comes out of Comic Con, and then there's going to be a whole lot of stuff coming out over the weekend, and by next week we'll have something interesting about that. But this week, nobody wants to talk about anything. Everybody's kind of saving it for the big convention, except for this. And this is kind of interesting. An interview with Quentin Tarantino, who was not going to Comic Con and hasn't made a movie yet and hasn't even decided whether his next movie is going to be the next Star Trek film or not. But he is certainly pondering it. Once Upon a Time in America is just about to be released, and he's already read the script for the new movie and likes it. And he is thinking about whether he's going to make that his last movie. He said that after 10 movies, he's going to quit directing movies, going to go into other things. So we can safely assume that he is either going to call it quits if Once Upon a Time in America is a huge hit, because you can't top that, or if it's not, he may make this Star Trek film and make it into a huge hit, hopefully, because he's going to do something completely different with it. Now, one of the things that we know about is that the script was written by Mark L. Smith. He's the same guy that wrote the script for The Revenant. So you know what kind of writer is writing this film. And while we don't have any details about it, we do know that William Shatner and Zachary Quinto and Patrick Stewart are all wanting to be in it, because he hasn't really said what era it's going to be in. He hasn't said that it's going to be in the Kelvin universe. He hasn't said it's going to be in the Prime universe. He hasn't said what timeline it is going to be and what point in that timeline it's going to be. So it could be at the time of the Next Generation. It could be at the time of the original series. It could be before or after any of that, because it's completely wide open. Simon Pegg recently said that we don't have to worry about a Tarantino movie because he's not going to make it Pulp Fiction in space. And Tarantino, in an interview in Deadline recently, said that Simon Pegg doesn't know what he's talking about. He'll make it absolutely Pulp Fiction in space. And so we know the kind of idea that Tarantino has going. Now, we don't know exactly what the script says and how it would resemble Pulp Fiction, but he said because this has not been seen, this is exactly what it's going to be. He's going to do something completely different with Star Trek because he believes that by putting his own touch to it, it's going to make it a completely different film and something that everybody's going to want to have to see. And I have to say, even as a Trek lover, even if he wrecks it, I've got to see it to see how he does it. I would be very interested in seeing what Tarantino does with a Star Trek film, and if it's going to have the language and the violence and all of this, if it's going to be Pulp Fiction in space. I'd like to see what that looks like. I'd like to see what he does with it. And he's saying basically it's a unique script, and that's the reason he wants to make it. And that's the reason that Paramount wants to make it. So it is simply a matter of, are we willing to take a chance? Tarantino in the interview talks about the fact that Deadpool, really much of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been of the very children oriented, really. I mean, it's got its adult elements, but the fact of the matter is that you're not having any of the language or attitudes that Deadpool did. And yet Deadpool became a great success, and so did the second film in that series. And so they're thinking there's nothing that they can ruin with Star Trek because the JJ films have not done that great. There hasn't been a really successful Trek film since the Star Trek First Contact. And in doing so, he's got all the freedom in the world in order to put this film together. And so that's what he plans to do if he decides to do the film. He also points out that J.J. Abrams did something completely different in the reboot series with completely recreating the timeline by creating the Kelvin universe. And so he said, with that in mind, he's already broken the ice that Tarantino can go and make Star Trek anything that he wants to. So you got to say that if it's good or it's bad, it's going to be something you're going to want to see, something you're going to want to see because it's going to be very different than anything that we've seen before. And we're not sure exactly how, but if Tarantino's doing it, you know it's going to be different. So I'd like to know what you think about this. I don't know what I think about this, honestly. I'm not sure that I would like it or not. All I know is that I'd want to see what he's going to do just so I could directly witness it. So let me know what you think about it. And please subscribe and, of course, ring the bell so you know when the next video is coming your way. We're going to keep an eye on San Diego Comic-Con and see what comes out of that and have more news for you on that as the time comes. But in the meantime, we look forward to hearing from you, and don't go far.